Hey guys, welcome to JLancer. And in today's tutorial, I want us to dive deeper into functions. So we'll be learning about parameters and arguments, default parameters, multiple parameters, return values, pass by reference, and lastly, function overloading. Okay, so to recap, on the last tutorial, we made a function. We created the function which was just displaying I got executed to the console. So this function had the return type of void and there were no parameters. So okay, now let's dive deeper. What are parameters? Well, information can be passed to functions as a parameter. So parameters act as variables inside the function. Parameters are specified after the function name inside the parentheses, and you can add as many parameters as you want. You just have to separate them with a comma. Okay, so let's see a practical example. Let's say now our function takes in one parameter, which is a string name. Remember, your prototype or your declaration has to be the same. These have to be the same. So this function now takes in one parameter, which is a name. This name will be used inside this function as a local variable. So as soon as this function ends execution, then this name will be destroyed. So it's local, not global. Okay, how can we use this name? Let's change this text to something like how is the tutorial? Okay, so now our function takes in one parameter, which is a name, and uses it to display how is the tutorial, then displays your name. So now when we call our function, we have to provide an argument. So one argument, let's say your name is Cindy. Let's run and see what happens. How is the tutorial, Cindy? Okay, as you can see guys, this is the output we were expecting. So now this function is much more useful because it takes in a parameter. It's much more flexible. You can, by changing the argument that you provide, you can display different text. Let's say we call this function again, but this time I provide an argument of, let's say, Sam, for example. So if I compile this, okay, avast cyber capture. Okay, there it is. How is the tutorial, Sandy? How is the tutorial, Sam? So as you can see, we were able to display two texts or two messages using just one function. By changing the argument that you provide, I think you all get what I'm trying to tell you. So this is the parameters, function C++ functions parameters. You can add parameters to a function and you can add as many as you want. So let's say we have an integer of age. When you provide the name, you'll also provide the age. So okay, so this time let's display something like name is is 8 years old. Okay, so now when we call our function, we have to provide the name and the age. The number of parameters have to be the same as the number of, or have to be equal to the number of arguments you provide. So if you take in 10 parameters, you have to provide 10 arguments. And keep in mind that the data type have to be in the correct order. So we start with the name because we provide the name parameter first. So name, then age. Let's say Cindy is 12 years old, then Sam is 30 years old. Let's see our output. Okay, so Cindy is 12 years old, Sam is 30 years old. I hope it's clear, guys. That's the power of functions. And you can do a lot with them. These are just simple examples to help you understand. Okay, so moving on. I also want to show you something. Okay, so Cindy. Okay, so over here we are having one parameter, the name parameter. We can have a default value. We can also use a default parameter by using this equal sign and providing a default value. Let's say our default value is so if you call has to be the same. Remember, your prototype has to be the same as your implementation. So the default value is if you call the function without providing any parameters, it will use this default value. Let's see it in action. Okay, so we are having an error there. Okay, so as you can see, guys, I I I just got executed I got executed so it uses this argument as the default value. Then if you call the function and you provide the name, it will override that name with what you provide. So say we provide Cindy. Okay, nice. I got executed Cindy. I hope you get it, guys. So a parameter with a default value is often known as an optional parameter. So this is optional. That's just a little extra knowledge for you guys. Okay, so to avoid that error that we saw before, you just have to provide the default argument on the definition. When you define, you provide. Here you just need the name of your variable. Okay, so moving forward, we have functions with return, which return something, or return keywords. What we've been using so far is a void keyword. So void just simply means, or it just indicates that the function should not return a value. So the function returns nothing. If we want to make a function that returns something, then we have to have the return keyword and the return type, which is int, string, double, etc. So as we've said, that the main function is a function, so it returns an integer, which is 0, and 0 is a representation of null, so it returns nothing. You could change this to void and remove this return keyword. It would still work. Okay, so now let's change our example. Okay, so now our function will receive an integer and just add 5 to it. So we wanna add 5 to whatever we receive, so we can just name this x. So the code to be executed, we want to return 5 plus whatever that we received. Let's say 5. Okay, what the hell did I just do? I changed our function from a void to an integer. Just simply means now our function returns an integer value. So cause the operation of our function adds 5 to the current value, or the value, the argument that we provide to the function. This is the formula. So you return 5 plus x, which is this variable, this argument. Okay, let's see the output. Okay, so nothing is displaying. What the heck is going on? How do we fix that? Yeah. The other difference between void and return type functions is the cout. So when you are using a void function, you just call the function. When you call the function, just write the function name and the parameters or the parentheses. So now this function returns something. That means this whole function represents an integer number. So when you see this function, you should see a number. Like right now, we should be seeing something like 10. Should be seeing 10. So this 10 won't just be displayed to the console. You have to provide or write your cout. So cout whatever the return is. Okay, so if we try to run it now, it should display 10. Okay, there it is, 10. To recap, guys, we changed our function to an integer so that it can return an integer value. Keep in mind that always the return type is the same as, well, rather not always, but in most cases your return type will be the same as your parameter. So if you are trying to calculate two double numbers, then your return type will also be a double. If you are adding two integer numbers, your return type will be an integer. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to show you guys was function overloading. So we can overload functions. So with function overloading, it's when multiple functions have the same name but with different parameters. So here we were adding 5 to an integer number and returning that integer. We can also have a double with the same name, my function, but this time instead of receiving an integer, we'll receive a double number. So the implementation will be plus minus the same. Okay, so now we wanna add 6.15 to the argument provided. So the user will provide an argument or a value, a double value. Then we add 6.15 to that value. Then we return the value. Okay, so if we call this function, because they are the same name, we overloaded the function. Meaning, if we call the function, then provide a double argument or a double parameter, then it will run this function. The C++ compiler will run this function. So instead of adding 5, you must add 6.15. Okay, so let's say that's 5.25. Let's run and see what happens. Okay, so 10, 11.5. Let's just comment that out. Okay, so 11.4, we get a double in return. Yeah guys, that's function overloading. Then lastly, I want us to look at pass by reference. So passing by reference. What we've been doing so far guys is passing by value. So there are two types of, or you can pass to functions in two ways: pass by value and pass by reference. So when you pass by reference, you are passing the memory location as an argument. So instead of passing the copy of the variable, you are passing the actual value or the actual variable. Okay, so I have this example over here which swaps two numbers. Okay, this is a void function, so it returns nothing. It swaps numbers, an x and a y. So this is the formula to swap the number. We just initialize a temporary local variable z to x, so the value of the memory content of x. So our first number is 10, the second number is 20. Before swap, it should be 10, 20. Then after we call the swap, it should be 20, 10. So let's run and see what happens. Okay, there's the output. Before swap 10, 20, after swap 20, 10. So guys, essentially what's happening here is before we just display before we call the function. So when we call the function, we provided two parameters or two arguments, which is the first number and the second number. We stored the memory location. So this ampersand just simply means reference, the reference to an x. So we stored, this represents the actual value of first number. So when we say x equals to y, we are actually changing the memory content of first number to the value of y, which is 20. So now this first number will change to 20, the second number will change to 10. So in some sense, pass by reference is used to use local variables as global variables. So you can change these variables inside this function without having to return the values for what. So it also optimizes your code because you are not creating copies of the variables. When you pass by value, you are essentially creating lots and lots of copies. So here you are passing the actual value, so you are working with the actual variable. Okay guys, that's it. That's all you need to know. Well, not need to know, that's all you need as basics to C++ functions. Well, good luck on your coding journey. Share, like and subscribe.